You think you know your mind. You believe it's you, the thinker, the doer, the voice behind your every thought. But what if that voice isn't yours? What if the one speaking in your head has never truly seen you? Like an eye that cannot turn to look within, the mind cannot touch the silence from which it speaks. Since childhood, you've been drifting in a river of thought. Words chasing words, images chasing images, memories rising like ghosts from fires that burned long ago. And somewhere in that endless flow, you made an unspoken agreement. You decided this river, this noise, was you. That every current of thought defined your identity. That every emotion was proof of who you are. But here's the secret no one tells you. The mind is not the light. It is the mirror. It does not create, it reflects. It borrows its brilliance from something far older, a source so deep, so still, it cannot be named. The mind thinks it generates awareness, as if it were the sun producing light. But like the moon shining in the night sky, it only glows because something unseen illuminates it. And yet, it pretends. Oh, how perfectly it pretends. It builds towers of knowledge, constructs philosophies, wraps itself in the illusion of control. It measures, compares, explains, but never once asks the only question that could shatter its illusion. What am I reflecting? There was a time before the noise, before language, before the mind learned to name the world and divide it. You were whole then, pure awareness, undivided light. But the mind grew loud. It learned to speak, and with every word it drew a line. This is me. That is not me. This is good. That is bad. The mirror began to mistake its reflections for the world itself. It forgot it was only glass. And now, here you are, believing you are the mirror, believing the reflection is all there is. But what if you're not the mirror at all? What if you are the light behind it, the presence that makes seeing possible, the silence that gives birth to every sound, the awareness watching the watcher? What if everything you've ever called me is only a reflection, and the real you has been waiting, patiently, to be remembered? If something inside you remembers this truth, if it stirs quietly beneath the noise, let it speak, not through words, but through recognition. Leave your reflection below and tell me, when was the last time you experienced yourself beyond thought? You've spent your whole life inside the mirror, listening to its reflections, trusting its stories, believing the echo was the source. And maybe, right now, you can feel it, that subtle unease that comes when you start to see the illusion. The realization that the voice in your head never stops speaking, even when you're desperate for silence. The mind never stops. From the moment you wake until the moment you sleep, and even then in dreams, it moves endlessly. It calculates. It compares. It judges. It narrates your every breath as if quiet were a threat. You can't walk down a street without commentary. You can't sit in stillness without noise. You can't look at the world without the mind trying to explain it. It's terrified of emptiness, because emptiness exposes it. And so it builds, not walls of stone, but structures of thought, loops of worry, towers of memory, corridors of fear. It tells you stories about who you are. It replays the past like a movie you can't stop watching. It rehearses the future like a script you'll never perform. And you believe those stories. You live in them. You become them. This is the prison, not built of iron or chains, but of language, of habit, of the invisible bars of belief. Every opinion is a lock, every assumption a guard, every I am is a wall. You think you're free because you can think whatever you want, but that's the cruelest trick of all, because the more you think, the less free you become. Thought is not freedom, it is repetition. It circles the same fears, returns to the same wounds, defends the same fragile image of self, built from memories that no longer exist. The mind says, without me, you'd be lost. It whispers, without me, there is nothing. But here's the secret it hides. It doesn't know who you are. It only knows what it's been taught, what it's repeated so often that repetition became identity. The mind knows the past because the past is safe. It knows the story because stories are predictable. But the present? The living, breathing now? It cannot touch it because the present is not a thought. It's not an image, not a memory, not an idea. The present is alive, and the mind can only grasp what's already dead. So it drags you backward into regret. It pushes you forward into anxiety. It keeps you anywhere but here. And when you try to control it, when you meditate, when you seek peace, when you force silence, it rebels. It mocks you. It screams louder. Because the mind was never the enemy. The real trap is believing you are the mind. You are not the noise. You are the space it fills. You are not the storm. You are the sky in which it moves. Emmet Fox saw this clearly. The mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. It was meant to serve you, to translate the wisdom of the unseen into action, to shape form without stealing the light that gives it life. But somewhere, the servant took the throne. The reflection crowned itself the sun. And the awareness behind it, you, became the captive. You began treating every thought as sacred, every emotion as truth, every inner voice as divine decree. But most of what the mind produces is noise, echoes of childhood, fragments of fear, ghosts of belief. You meditate to escape it, but the one trying to escape is it. You chase peace with the very thing that resists it.
Fox understood the paradox. You can't think your way out of thinking. You can only see thought for what it is, a ripple on the surface of the ocean. When you watch a movie, you don't confuse yourself with the actors. You know you're the one sitting in the theater, watching light dance on a screen. The same is true of thought. You are not the characters in your mind's story. You are the one aware that the story exists. And when you remember that, the walls begin to fade. The door was never locked. The chains were made of dreams. And the moment you see the prison for what it is, you realize there was never a prison at all. Just a mirror, mistaking its reflections for reality.
There is a moment in every human life when the greatest mistake is made. It happens quietly, without witnesses, without sound. No thunder, no warning. Just a subtle shift, a turning away from the source toward its reflection. It's the moment the mind forgets what it is. That instant it looks at its own reflection and says, "This is me." That's how the confusion begins. The mirror believes it is the sun. The reflection believes it is the light. You start to think you are your thoughts. You begin to feel as if every emotion, every impulse, every passing judgment is who you are. And from that single illusion, every other illusion unfolds. Now every thought feels personal. Every emotion feels absolute. Every judgment feels righteous. The mind becomes the master, and awareness, the true self, becomes the silent servant. This is the birth of ego. Not a monster inside you, not a separate entity plotting your downfall, just a case of mistaken identity. The ego is simply the mind believing it is you, the reflection claiming to be the source, the mirror insisting, "I am the light." And once that belief takes root, 1,000 smaller delusions grow from it. You start to defend yourself, not your real self, but the image your mind has built. You protect the story. You guard the reflection. You react instead of respond. You judge instead of witness. You grasp instead of trust. And slowly, you become fragile, brittle, easily wounded, because the image the mind creates is fragile, made of thought, and thought can shatter, made of memory, and memory fades, made of comparison, and comparison always loses. So the mind works harder. It strengthens its walls. It polishes its reflection. It constructs arguments to defend the image it is mistaken for life. And all the while, the real you, the awareness beyond the noise, waits patiently, untouched, like sunlight hidden behind clouds that believe they own the sky. Emmet Fox saw this clearly. Build your house upon the rock of truth, not upon the shifting sands of opinion and emotion. But the mind builds on sand, constantly moving, constantly rearranging itself to appear stable. One day confident, the next uncertain. One moment sure of itself, the next afraid of its own shadow. This endless shifting is exhausting. You know it. You felt it. The inner pendulum that never stops swinging between control and collapse. And yet the stillness underneath, the rock Fox spoke of, never moves. It's been there all along. That's what you are. Not the shifting thoughts, but the ground beneath them. Not the reflection, but the surface that allows reflection to exist. Fox understood that the human mind is a brilliant servant, capable of shaping beauty, creating art, translating the divine into form. But only when it remembers its place. When the mind serves the light, it reflects truth. When it believes itself to be the light, it distorts everything it touches. That's when suffering begins. Not because the world is cruel, but because the mirror forgot what it is. The mind becomes a tyrant, building problems just to solve them, inventing enemies just to stay busy, creating meaning just to feel alive. It turns the sacred simplicity of life into a battlefield. But life was never a war. It was always a garden. And you are not the battlefield. You are not the wound. You are not the warrior struggling to win your own reflection. You are the light that sees it all, the awareness behind every battle, untouched by victory or defeat. The tragedy of humanity is not evil, it's forgetfulness. We've forgotten what we are, and in that forgetting, we've lost peace, lost presence, lost the direct experience of being alive. Because when you believe you are the mind, you cannot rest. The mind never rests. It moves from problem to problem, fear to fear, thought to thought, like a restless tide searching for the shore it already carries within. But here's the miracle. You are not the tide. You are the ocean beneath it. You are the stillness it moves within.
You are the light it reflects, but can never become. And the instant you remember this, the instant you see the difference between mirror and source, everything changes. Not because life becomes easier, but because illusion ends. You stop fighting your own reflection. You stop defending a dream. You stop mistaking the echo for the voice. The mind keeps moving, but you no longer follow. Thoughts appear, but they no longer define you. The mirror remains, but now it knows its place. Clear, polished, silent. And through it, the light shines again.
There is a place within you that has never spoken. It has no arguments, no opinions, no sound. It does not defend itself. It simply is. The mind cannot find this place, because this place existed before the mind began. It is not an idea, but the field from which all ideas rise and fall, like waves on an unseen ocean. This silence is not empty. It is not the nothingness your mind fears. It is fullness, alive, complete, untouched by thought. It is awareness itself, the quiet ground of being that watches every thought come and go without ever being moved. When you touch it, you realize something astonishing. You have never been the noise. You have always been the space that allows it. But the mind resists this discovery. It tells you silence is dangerous. It whispers, "Without me, you'll disappear." It convinces you that stillness is death. And so you fill the space with sound, with screens, with endless conversations about nothing. You run from the quiet as if it were chasing you. But the silence does not chase. It waits. Patient. Ancient. It has been here long before you were born and will remain long after the mind falls silent. This is what Emmet Fox meant when he said, "The food you furnish to your mind determines the whole character of your life." What do you feed your mind? The stale bread of memory? The bitter fruit of comparison? The endless replay of past wounds and imagined futures? Or do you feed it presence? The simple awareness of this moment, the feeling of breath moving in and out, the miracle of being here at all. Because when you stop feeding the mind with identification, when you no longer believe every thought that appears, the mind begins to starve. Not in suffering, but in liberation. The noise fades, the current slows, the mirror clears. And suddenly, without effort, the light appears again. You don't force the quiet. You don't fight the thoughts. You simply see them, like leaves drifting on a stream. You don't stop the water. You just stop clinging to it. This is meditation in its purest form, not a practice of control, but a practice of surrender. Not silence achieved, but silence revealed. When thought arises, you don't follow. When emotion surges, you don't resist. You let everything pass through like wind through an open field. You begin to sense something extraordinary. The stillness beneath every sound. The light behind every reflection. The infinite presence that has always been here, waiting for you to notice. Fox described it as living in the presence of God, but you can call it anything you wish. It's not about religion, it's not about belief. It's about the direct experience of awareness itself, alive, borderless, unspoken. And in this realization, the struggle ends. The urgency dissolves. You stop trying to fix what was never broken. You stop trying to awaken, because you see now you were never asleep. You cannot think your way into this. You cannot reason your way home. You can only stop running, stop reaching, stop pretending to be the mirror. And when you do, the light reveals itself, quietly, naturally, inevitably. The mind does not disappear. It becomes clear. It becomes soft. It becomes what it was always meant to be, a surface through which the infinite shines. This is the silence behind the mirror, not absence, but vastness. Not the death of thought, but the birth of awareness. Touch it once, and you will never forget. Because it is more real than thought, more true than any belief, more alive than anything the mind could ever imagine. It is the you that has always been here. Before the first word, after the final thought. Beyond all beginnings and endings. You are not becoming this, you are this. And the mind, for all its brilliance, has simply been too loud to hear it. Now you begin to remember, not through effort, but through stillness. Because silence is not the end of thought, it is the beginning of truth.
And then, without effort, without announcement, something begins to turn. It's subtle, almost invisible, like dawn dissolving the night, not through battle, but through the quiet authority of light. You have spent your life letting the mind lead, letting thought dictate action, fear dictate silence, and desire dictate direction. The mind was the captain, and you obeyed its orders. You chased every question, every answer, every illusion of control. But now you begin to see the truth. The mind was never steering the ship. It was only tracing circles on an infinite sea it could never comprehend. And in that seeing, a reversal begins. You stop demanding clarity from thought. You stop chasing certainty through logic. You stop believing peace is something to understand. Instead, you listen, you wait, you allow. And in that waiting, something sacred rises, an intelligence that has no words, no shape, no agenda. It doesn't argue, it doesn't rush, it simply knows. Some call it intuition, others call it grace. Fox called it divine consciousness, the mind of Christ in man. But it is not distant, it does not belong to saints or mystics, it belongs to life itself. It's the same intelligence that beats your heart without permission, that heals a wound without your instruction, that turns a seed into a forest without ever needing a plan. This is the light, the real one, the one the mirror has been reflecting all along. And when you let this light lead, everything changes, not because life becomes easy, but because you stop resisting what is. You stop fighting the current and finally allow yourself to float. Emmet Fox said, "You cannot receive more than your consciousness can hold, and when your consciousness is full of noise, there is no room for the light to enter. But when you clear the clutter, when you stop feeding the mind's endless chatter, the light moves through you effortlessly, not as an idea, as presence, as quiet knowing,
as the still voice that whispers, "This way." You begin to act differently, not from fear or calculation, but from something deeper, the silent pull of what is true. You stop forcing outcomes. You stop trying to bend the world to your will. You stop using thought to manage the infinite. Instead, you align, you yield, you trust. And in that surrender, everything that once felt impossible begins to unfold with ease. Doors open that reason never could. Paths appear that logic never saw. The world stops being something to fix and becomes something to flow with. This is what Fox meant when he wrote, "There is no difficulty that enough love will not conquer, no disease that enough love will not heal, no door that enough love will not open." And that love, it is not sentiment, not emotion. It is the light itself. It is awareness allowing reality to be exactly what it is. Love is alignment. Love is surrender. Love is letting God think through you, act through you, live through you. When you let the light lead, you no longer move from need, but from wholeness. You no longer speak from fear, but from peace. You no longer seek the path, because you are the path, revealing itself one step at a time. The light does not reveal the entire journey. It only illuminates the ground beneath your feet. But that is enough, because when you walk by light, you stop tripping over shadows. The mind relaxes. It no longer needs to control. It no longer needs to prove or protect. It remembers its place, and what was once a tyrant becomes a servant again. A mirror, clear and still, reflecting the radiance of the source without distortion, you begin to notice something miraculous, the simplicity of peace. It was never hiding, it was only waiting for you to stop pretending to be the light. Now, you don't live against life, you live with it, you breathe with it, you move as it moves, and through you, the light expresses itself not as effort, but as grace. When the light leads, your words heal, your silence comforts, your presence itself becomes a sanctuary for those still trapped in their own reflections. This is faith, not belief in a story, but trust in what you can feel when you stop thinking. Faith that awareness itself is intelligent, that love itself is order, that surrender itself is strength. You no longer need to know, you only need to be, and in that being you discover the power that never left you, the quiet authority of the light that has always been leading even when you thought you were lost.
And so, you return, not to where you began, but to where you have always been, the place you never truly left, even when the mind built walls around it and called them truth. You return to presence, to awareness, to the light that was never born and will never die. But now you return awake, remembering, no longer lost in the dream of thought, no longer hypnotized by the mirror's endless reflections. You see the mind for what it is, a tool, not a tyrant, a servant, not a master, a mirror that reflects but does not create. And you see yourself for what you are, the light behind the mirror, the awareness in which all things arise and fall, the stillness that holds the storm without being moved by it. This is not transcendence. This is not escape. This is not about leaving the world behind or abandoning thought or pretending the mind no longer exists. The mind still thinks. Thought still arises. The mirror still reflects. But you are no longer confused. You are no longer identified. You are no longer imprisoned by your own reflection. You are free. Emmet Fox understood this freedom deeply. He wrote, "You must live in the present, launch yourself on every wave, find your eternity in each moment. Not in the future when you finally become enlightened, not in the past when everything felt whole, but here, now, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this simple eternal moment of being. This is the return, not a destination, but a recognition, not an arrival, but a remembering. And from this freedom, you live, not perfectly, not without challenge or difficulty or moments of forgetting, but with something solid underneath, a quiet knowing that doesn't come from certainty, but from presence itself. A peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, but exists as the foundation of your being. You move through the world differently now, not because you've become someone new, but because you've remembered who you always were. When the mind produces fear, you notice it. You feel it. But you do not become it. You let it pass through you like wind through an open window. When thought spins its stories of past regrets, of future catastrophes, of all the ways you should have been different, you see them for what they are. Reflections, shadows on the wall, not reality itself. And you are kind to the mind. You do not fight it. You do not shame it for its nature. You simply thank it for trying so hard to protect you, to understand you, to keep you safe. And then you gently return to the light. Again and again, you return. In every moment you remember, in every breath you take without needing to think about it. This is the practice now, not a practice of effort, but of remembering, not a practice of becoming, but of being. Fox taught that thoughts held in mind produce after their kind, meaning that whatever consciousness you dwell in becomes your experience of reality. When you dwell in the consciousness of fear, you experience a fearful world. When you dwell in the consciousness of separation, you experience isolation and conflict. But when you dwell in the consciousness of presence, in the awareness that you are the light, not the mirror, you experience life as it truly is, whole, alive, sacred. And as you live this way, something subtle shifts in the world around you. People sense it. They may not know what they're sensing, but they feel the difference. The absence of resistance, the presence of something solid beneath the surface. You become a mirror that reflects clearly because it no longer distorts the light with its own need to be seen, to be validated, to be right. And you become a presence that allows others to remember their own light, not by teaching, not by preaching, but simply by being what you are. And in quiet moments, in the space between thoughts, in the pause between breaths, you remember the words that brought you here. You are not the mirror. You are the light behind it. Not a concept, not a philosophy, not an idea to understand. A truth, a living, breathing reality that needs no proof, because it is more real than anything the mind could ever conceive. You are awareness itself, presence itself, the infinite aliveness that watches the mind think, the heart beat, the world turn. You are what you have always been, what you could never stop being, no matter how lost you seemed, no matter how deep the forgetting went. And now, having remembered, you rest, not in the sense of inaction, but in the sense of being, fully here, fully alive, fully yourself. The mind may still rise with its questions, its doubts, its endless commentary, and that's okay. Let it. Because you are not the mind. You never were. You are the light that allows the mind to exist, the awareness that makes thought possible, the presence that holds it all without needing it to be anything other than what it is. Fox reminded us, your heart's desire is the voice of God, and that voice must be obeyed sooner or later. And what is your heart's deepest desire? Beneath all the surface wants, beneath all the mind's endless demands for security and recognition and control, it is this: to remember what you are, to come home to the light, to rest in the awareness that was never born and will never die. This is not a goal. It is not something you must achieve tomorrow or next year or after enough meditation. It is available now. It has always been available. It is what you are when you stop pretending to be the mind. And in this knowing, there is peace. Not the peace the mind seeks, the peace of having everything figured out, of being in control, of never feeling pain again, but the deeper peace beneath all of that, the peace that exists whether the mind is quiet or loud, whether life is easy or hard, whether you understand or remain in mystery, the peace of being what you are, nothing more, nothing less, the light, always the light, and the mirror finally reflects it clearly. You are not what you think. You are what thinks. You are not the reflection. You are the source. And now, in this moment, in this breath, in this eternal now, you remember. The light was never lost. It was only waiting for the mirror to stop claiming its brilliance and remember what it was always meant to do: reflect. And you never were the mirror. You are the light. You have always been the light. And the light never forgets itself.